All right, welcome back to Virtual School Assembly for this professional development session. Today we're pleased to introduce Dr. James Pedersen. Dr. Pedersen is currently superintendent for the Essex County Schools of Technology, which is an award-winning school district in New Jersey. His career in education spans over 25 years and includes a variety of instructional and administrative positions. He's had the opportunity to teach as an adjunct professor at Felician University, Montclair University, and Delaware Valley University. Dr. Pedersen is the author of several articles and 2 books focused on education: Rise of the Millennial Parents and Summer versus School, The Possibilities of Year-Round School. He and his wife Faith have 3 daughters, Emily, Veronica, and Cynthia. Dr. Pedersen, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure being here. So today, well, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to whatever applies to you.
Good morning.
Morning. Good morning.
Oh, and in case I don't see you, good afternoon, good evening, and good night.
So today I would like to just go briefly talk about what the emergency remote transition to online learning that my district underwent. And you know what I wanted to start off with is a quote, and it says, "Don't dig a well when you're thirsty." And I think that's kind of that was our success. So before the things that were happening out in California, and I believe that was starting in January or February, myself as well as other colleagues were looking at what was going on and just monitoring what was happening on the West Coast as we were moving, and we're housed in New Jersey. And we started to just monitor those things. And when we started to look at that, we said, well, we need to see and get some of our things in place. Now, we were fortunate. We're what was considered a VOTEC school district. So we have 3 high schools, all high school students. We changed our name to the Schools of Technology because we thought that there's technology in every single thing, whether you're doing construction, robotics, or cosmetology. Technology is infused in everything. We were fortunate. We already had a one-to-one initiative. So that was a real key piece. We also, last year, my assistant superintendent, Ms. Dixiana Carbonell, had made sure that every single teacher had some online component already in place. So they had lessons in there. Now, some of the academic teachers were much stronger than some of the other areas, but every single teacher had something in place. And then when we saw the winds of change or reading the tea leaves of what was going to occur, we started to develop our plan. And I found something that was a really good site was called the Rapid Transition to Online Learning, and it's a website, and I went through it, and there's a little course that I took. It was about 40 minutes. This was about two weeks before we actually even went into the quarantine. And in doing so, we set up our own virtual high schools on our website with my tech director. And we started to fill in all those things and link all those either Google Classrooms or Moodles or all the different variety of things that our teachers had onto our website, so that this way you could start to click in and every teacher's name was there. Everything was it was all in a click away. So a parent who had no real idea of what was going on could easily figure out their child's school, then click down to the subject. If they wanted to go to the nurse's office, there was a button for that. If they wanted to go to the administrative. So we just made it real super user friendly. Then we started to poll our students to make sure that everybody had some kind of Wi-Fi connectivity. And the week before, we told our teachers, have at least 2 weeks of lesson plans ready, because it was supposed to be a 2-week quarantine at the worst. Almost 4 months later, it happened to something else. But when we went out, we already had all of that infrastructure in place. One of the things, though, that we noticed that we needed to have, and this is lessons learned, but I'll throw it in here in the beginning, having virtual servers is a is a great help. My IT director, Scott, told me this, so that this way, instead of, if you ever wanted to put software, instead of putting it on, I don't know, a classroom full of computers, you put it on your virtual server and it pushes it out to those specific computer, the class. For example, we have drafting, and trying to get drafting software on Chromebooks is almost impossible because there's not enough memory in the computer itself. But when you're using your virtual servers, it's almost unlimited. So that's one of the things we wish we had in place. We didn't, but we do have it now. So once that happened, we were already in that mode. I have to say that we only have high school students. So when you're looking at these things, and I know some of my colleagues, it is very, very, very challenging. And I wouldn't be an expert on this, but early childhood, elementary, middle school students, well, middle school and high school, there's probably a little bit more similarities, but some of the challenges for early childhood and elementary could pose some serious things. As we talked before, having a 5-minute video doesn't really help anything for a kindergarten student. Some of the other things that we learned along the way as well is that looking at our certain populations that really need assistance, our child study team stuff, where some of the students, maybe in inclusion, were okay with some of these lessons, but some of the other ones that needed just a little bit more support, we really had to figure out what we were doing, and we had to be really creative with that. And the other one was ELL students as well. Our initial same thing. We wanted to make sure that we didn't miss any one of our target audiences. We also, the first thing we did which didn't work out was replicate the same schedule. So this is the difference between synchronous and asynchronous learning. We figured, especially when it was only going to be 2 weeks, just follow the same bell schedule. So if you had English at 8 o'clock and lunch at 11 o'clock, that's what you're going to follow the schedule. And we realized within 2 weeks, and then when we realized it was going to be longer, that was not going to work. With the assistance of the teachers, we all collaboratively got together and we came up with another schedule, which was more of asynchronous learning, so that this way there are components of it that could be synchronous, where they would have to check in, and we use more block scheduling and where A/B scheduling, so that the teachers didn't see the students every single day, but they saw them 2 or 3 times a week, depending on the schedule. Much more looking more a little like college, but it was much more rewarding for the experience for the teachers as students, and from the feedback from the parents as well, because we're getting really hard to keep up with all of those things. Then teaching the teachers about flipped learning, which was sometimes you have to have the students do some of the work in real time, some of the work for you, and when and where to do that. Some of the other nuts and bolts things that we had to take care of, the non-instructional, was making sure that we had our guidance department in place. So we had some challenges, but we overcame, so that this way we could do actually online counseling, group counseling. We could even have the child study team work with the students, with the parents. We also made sure that as a staff, once again, it sounded like a good idea, but I decided I was going to meet with my staff, the entire district, every day at 8 o'clock. And we thought it was 2 weeks. It was a great idea. 4 months later, I don't know if they were getting tired of me or not, but I had the best compliment from a bunch of them that said, "Dr. Pedersen, I don't even watch the news anymore." I said, "Why not?" They said, "Well, you're going to tell me what's important on our 8 a.m. Zoom meeting anyway. So I figure if it's really important, you'll let me know." So I thought that was a compliment. So that's what I did, just to keep the staff involved. Then the principals had their own meetings with their building teachers and staff, so that they were kept involved. And then, and in addition, the principals met with the students on a regular basis. And we also included workshops for the parents as well. So we met with the parents to hear their concerns. And we also had guest speakers along the way to keep the students motivated. For our central office, we made sure that we had put a lot of things in place, so that we had VPNs. So all of the purchasing, all of the accounting can continue seamlessly without any interruptions, and that was some of the most important things. As we moved on, we realized that now looking back and now projecting about what could happen in September. So we finished the year out. We had a lot of successes, but now looking backwards, if we had to do this over again, what we're looking to do is this: we're looking to have one standard model platform. As I said before, our teachers were free to choose whatever they wanted. And some teachers, it's a lot easier to do an English classroom. Is a lot easier than to do a construction classroom. Or think about this: if you're teaching a welding class, how do you watch just videos on welding without practical stuff? So what we decided to do is, there's a company that we're using, Schoology, that's connected to Edmentum, and it has these components with a lot of the built-in features. And our plan next year is this: we're going to run, I'm calling it There's synchronous learning, which happens in real time. Asynchronous, that could happen anytime you want, like taking a college class. I'm calling this dual synchronous. And what we're going to do is we are going to have both platforms available. If we're going to be teaching in real time, but we're also going to have every teacher have his or her class modularized so that there is also that online component in case we have students who can't come in for a variety of reasons, maybe for health related reasons, or if there's a spike and we have to go out for another 2 months, that it could be uninterrupted. And even if we came back and then had to go back out, if we follow these modules that the teachers will be creating, that are creating now, with this dual synchronous approach, it doesn't matter what's going to happen, whether the students are there face to face or they're home. Everyone's learning the same thing, and the teachers are coming from the same kind of the same place of learning. That's our approach that we're doing right now, and we're getting ourselves ready for that and planning for the unplannable.
And certainly that's where we all are right now with such an uncertain future. I know some schools have already locked down what fall's going to look like for them, but we know from what happened in March that even those plans can change from day to day or week to week. And so we have to be willing to be adaptable here. I want to dig into a few of the things that you talked about. Let's start with synchronous versus asynchronous. I know as a teacher, this was something I really struggled with because not only did I have my 27 students that I wanted to connect with, but then I came home with my 4 children and their 17 teachers, because 2 of them are in middle school, and trying to get on the same schedule. And so synchronous became a nightmare for us because different schools and different teachers were doing things at different times, and we couldn't support our kids in all those things at the same time. Did you have a solution for that in your school where your teachers could check in with their students, but it wasn't overwhelming?
Yeah, so what we did, once again, I think the best thing to do as a leader is just listen to the people on the front lines, because, from back in the back, everything looks good and everything could look like a plan. What they said was, why don't we come to an agreement where maybe it's only 2 times a week there is a synchronous portion of their class. So maybe it's a 15-minute group discussion or something along those lines. And that was very, very doable. And it was very manageable, so that this way those were the non-negotiables. Mm-hmm. And then the negotiables were when the assignments were due, and then there's a little flexibility with the due dates and things and things of that nature. So it was not that overwhelming, because we also had to keep in mind there were a lot of teachers who were teaching our students and then teaching their own children.
Right. Yeah, no, that's the issue that we faced exactly. But I like having some periods of synchronicity with my students. We just did Friday check-ins, and they weren't even mandatory, they were optional, but it was a chance because I'm an elementary school teacher, they needed that social interaction. They needed to see their classmates, be able to talk about whatever. And so that was a real big morale booster for my students, just to be able to check in and for me to get a pulse of how things was going. As far as asynchronous, I know a few things that I tried as a teacher. So I'd pre-record the math lessons, and so I could walk them through different things. And I want to talk more about that later as far as reinventing the wheel with some of that kind of instruction. But the other things that I did is I started doing a daily just newsletter type video to parents and students saying, okay, this is what we're doing today. So it wasn't just an email, it wasn't just a bulletin on the thing. And a lot of parents and students really loved having that daily check-in with the teacher where they could watch it at any time, but having that video. What kinds of things were your teachers doing just to check in with their students?
A couple of things. Let me start with the real fun stuff, and then we'll get to the more instructional stuff. But one of my math supervisor came up with a scavenger hunt day. Sometimes we forget that school is about socialization, and we have those days where you have the pep rally, and we actually had pep rallies. Mm-hmm. And some were more successful than others, but to throw in that other stuff, because school is to me and is much more than just academics. It is an experience.
Sure. And
so we had to, the learning part is one thing, it's the experience part that we needed to work on. And we didn't figure that out until a week or two, or maybe even 3 or 4 weeks in. So that was part of that. But the teachers, so that we had the teachers who were checking in, then we had the counselors who kept checking in, the principals who would have grade level meetings. Myself and my parent coordinator and some of my administrators would check in with the parents, so that, and then of course sometimes the students were in those meetings. So it was a lot of that kind of thing. In some cases with the guidance counselors, they would do either single counseling or perhaps with the permission of the parent, of course, or there would be group counseling. And some of the things range from, some serious stuff to just career and college guidance. So those check-ins were really, really important. We had all hands on deck, which we were really fortunate, so that the students who did not sign in for whatever reason, and we monitored our attendance every single day. And the kids who did not check in, we had a phone call in that, because they all had to check in at a certain point for their attendance. The secretaries were on the phone calling the parents what was going on. And then we would find out like, oh no, I'm sorry, my other child had to use the computer, or I had to do something for work, or we had to leave to go food shopping. So all of those regular things, fortunately nothing terrible, but so they were on top of it so that people knew that. But when you were talking about the asynchronous learning, I think the hard thing that we needed to do, and one of the other takeaways, was training or orientation for our parents and our students next year going forward. Because we forget the big motivation for when students see us every day. And when I was a teacher, it was the same thing. If I had an assignment due on the 15th of July or whatever it was with the date, every single day I would remind, don't forget about your project, due the 15th. You'd call home to one of those students' parents who always waits the last minute. Don't forget about, if it was due 2 weeks from now, I would probably mention it at least 30 times. Right. So when you for the asynchronous, you're taking away what we usually have of that daily reminders. So we have to figure around that, and we just, sometimes we just assume kids can manage their time. For a teenager, for other children, sometimes 5 minutes could be either an eternity, or they can't remember what happened they can't think about what's going to happen in 5 minutes, nor do they remember what happened 5 minutes ago. So that asynchronous poses some challenges of what we could do to try to help them stay involved. We haven't figured that out entirely, but maybe some daily reminders or whatever the case is to shoot out to the parents and them like, hey, stay on track.
Right. Those are some great ideas. I love the idea of an orientation. I think that could help any school just in establishing some expectations for the year and having some protocols in place. I mentioned earlier a little bit about reinventing the wheel. I think one of the challenges us teachers are finding right now, and especially planning for an uncertain future this fall, is thinking about, okay, well, if we are in a virtual environment, I still want to do some instruction, where I'm in the classroom. And so, for example, I've been going into school this summer, recording all my math lessons where I have my slides and I have the board to work out problems, and I can do that. And I'm doing 100 math lessons this summer, putting them on a YouTube channel, level 6 math or something like that. And I'll have that, which is really cool, because for the rest of my teaching career, I have that as a resource. So when I'm gone, or if kids need to go through lessons again at home, now we have that channel. But I'm afraid that, if we have thousands or hundreds of thousands of teachers across the world doing the same thing, why aren't we utilizing one another's resources and doing things that we can share across classrooms? Do you have any thoughts on that, on how teachers can still have a connection with their students, but not have to redo everything they've done for the last 30 years?
Yeah, I think my response to that would be, you're right. Your instincts are telling you right. Why recreate the wheel when it's already out there? And there could be unfortunately, there could be someone who just does a better job at explaining it. I think the difference though is that, go back to that synchronous part. So if you have that flip learning where you have them watch that concept, but only your students well enough to say, okay, here's where you may have even replaying the tape, where you're kind of like a football coach replaying that tape going, you see what happened here, or whatever the case is, making that personal connection. That's where the synchronous learning comes in, so that this way you could either reinforce it, or if they have any questions about it, you can elaborate on it. I know there is this pull to try to do our own videos, but I think sometimes maybe it's just best. I think our resources are better handled, and in looking at what's already out there and then adding our own humanity to it.
Right. I agree with you. And it's a hard thing as a teacher because I could just put my students on Khan Academy where they're doing a great job explaining certain principles, or other websites that do that. Part of the reason I want to create my own videos is I do know, having taught this content for many years, that they're going to get hung up on this particular kind of assignment. And so I want to explain. Obviously, one solution to that would be default to some other teacher doing it, and then in those problem areas make special videos just for that, or work through that on a Zoom call or whatever.
Well, that sounds also like a great PLC project too.
Sure.
Professional. We all use different acronyms all around, but
Yeah.
professional learning community, where as a department or even in your district, you could say, let's get all the math people together or whatever the case is, and you break up the lessons. And so there's a little bit of that still homemade quality of it, where at least at a district level or maybe a building level, you're doing it, but you have your own proprietary control over it. And then you also get to spread some of that other things out. And then I think that could work as well.
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, I think that's one of the coolest things that's come from this pandemic period is with my team, we've gotten together and we're continuing to meet throughout the summer to say, okay, I love math and social studies, so I'm going to take the lead in those areas. Now you're going to take science, and we're going to share resources, and we're going to communicate together. I'm seeing awesome opportunities in those areas just because I'm working more closely with my PLC, with my team. But then I'm able to shine in the areas where I get the most fulfillment. So I really enjoy that. Let's talk about flipped learning for a little bit here. One of the challenges that a lot of teachers are seeing moving into the future is if they're doing a lot of the instruction in an online environment, and then the class time is specifically to answer questions and to troubleshoot and to work on things, that works well if we actually see our students. But if we're fully virtual, that becomes much more challenging. So
Yeah.
what can you do as far as, this flipped kind of model for learning if students are opting not to come to school at all, or if we have to go back to a fully virtual environment?
Yeah, that you got to flip the flipped classroom. Yeah, because it became no longer flipped because everybody was in the virtual world. So I think that the better way to even call it is just the blended learning itself.
Mm-hmm.
So that this way there's just a variety of different strategies that you're using, where you're either using like group instructions, or you use the breakout room so that they could do their own projects and presentations working together, and then they could come back and they could use that time. I think it goes really breaking into what's going to be synchronous, what's going to be asynchronous.
Right.
And if you get those things taken care of, I think all that other stuff with flip learning and everything, all the other, whether it's videos, whether it's group chats, whether it's group projects or presentations, or you're using screencasts, or the students are now actually, that was one of the things is called flipping the teacher. So if you can, have your students teach the lesson. Right. Or even mini lessons. They don't have to do the whole 40-minute, just mini lessons. And I think that's where some of us have issues, kind of like, a little control. But once you get into that freedom of it, it could be kind of interesting. And if you have them submit the lessons that's recorded, you could actually work with them, give them feedback like your administrator would do to you, right, before they actually present it, maybe live.
Yeah,
so now
that's great.
So now they're giving an A lesson.
Right. Yeah, I think honestly, we're seeing so many opportunities from this. We're seeing more project-based learning. We're seeing more group collaboration. And I think moving forward, this can radically change what we do in schools, even in the new normal. Moving forward, I think we're going to see more opportunities for students to do hands-on collaborative work because we're being forced to do it right now, which I think is a great opportunity.
Yeah.
Cool.
What we haven't really explored yet is the virtual reality and how that could help out. And especially for some of the trades that we have. I mean, it's really hard for some of those hard to reach things. Like how do you do this if you're doing, I don't know, if you're doing cosmetology or anything else, right, one of those other with your hands. But this is where I think that the software developers, or maybe even the textbook developers, imagine if we could, even for different history classes, instead of talking about, I don't know, the Revolutionary War, actually putting into into like a gamifying it and being in there,
Yeah.
or any other setting, or, I had when we were looking at some virtual headsets. I mean, could you imagine if you sent a permission slip home to the parents saying, your child, I need permission slip for your child to go to the ancient Egypt, and having them to sign it or virtually sign it because they're going to, or visit, whatever the case is,
Yeah.
the
Yeah,
pyramids.
it's funny because we look at, in media and Hollywood, we've seen this for a while, these futuristic movies with VR and showing what's possible. And we're starting to see that in real life, that we can do some of those things. I mean, I've loved in science to be able to virtually dissect a frog instead of touch the frog, because I hate the smell of the formaldehyde and stuff like that. But I am excited to be able to do welding, and cosmetology and things like that virtually, because right now that's really going to be a huge challenge for the next year or two as the software catches up to where we're at as a culture. So I think, there's a lot of opportunity there for development and innovation. And in the meantime, we're making the best of it and trying to do this through some sort of blended model. So I think you're spot on. Well, Dr. Pedersen, thank you so much for your time today. It's been so helpful to get your ideas and especially to hear what worked well for your district as you were prepared. I certainly see that, there were schools that really thrived during this time and others that floundered, but I think we'll all be better prepared for 2020, 2021. So thank you so much for your help today.
It was a pleasure. Thank you.